pray that the words of my mouth and the meditation of each and every one of our hearts here today will please God, who is our eternal rock and our Redeemer. Over the course of our lifetime, we will answer thousands and thousands of questions. Now, many of these questions will be easy to answer and relatively unimportant. Burger King or McDonald's? Or Shea Golden Crust, if we have a little fancy night out. Chocolate or vanilla? Comedy or drama? Chick flick or war movie, right? And we all know the answer to that, right? But some of the questions may be a little harder for us to answer. Where do babies come from? Mommy? Daddy? When will I be old enough to date? Right? These are questions that parents don't generally look forward to. Husbands, tough question to answer. Does this outfit make me look... There's no right answer to that. Come on, ladies. We love you, right? That's our answer. We love you so much, honey. Ask Brian Megas. He's got the perfect answer for that question. We discussed this years ago, and he wowed me with his answer. Which is proof positive that prayer can make miracles happen. Other questions that we will answer will be very important and will affect our lives. You know, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? What do you want to major when you get to college? Should I leave this job, which seems possibly unstable, to go to that other job that I don't know, but seems from this perspective to be more stable, right? In our economy, we have tough questions like that that are important to answer. Will we be able to afford this house? Is this the house that we should buy? How about this important question? Will you have this man to be your husband? Or will you have this woman to be your wife? Some questions are very important in life, but there is one question that supersedes in importance. It excels in importance. It is so far above the rest that they don't even match, come close to matching in comparison. Your life, your very soul, depends upon your answer to that question. The answer that you give to that question will determine where you are going to spend your eternity. And it's the question that Jesus asked his disciples in today's passage. Who do you say that I am? Who is Jesus? Who do you believe Jesus is? What do you say about Jesus? What do you tell others about Jesus? Who is Jesus? The power of the church rests on the answer to this question, the identity of Jesus. The church is founded upon the truth of Peter's declaration about that identity. Peter responds to Jesus' question and he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And this is an answer that is so right and so perfect. Jesus says to him, "You couldn't have thought of that yourself. No one here on earth could have told you that. No one but my Father in heaven, the Spirit of God, has revealed that truth to you, Peter. And upon this rock, I will build my church." What rock? What rock is God? Is Jesus talking about there? Not Peter. The declaration that Peter makes. The Roman Catholic Church would have you believe that it is Peter. And they are the descendants of Peter, and so that's why they are the only true church. But the true church is founded on the faith, that declaration, that truth that Peter states he has the high privilege of being the first person to declare the true identity of Jesus Christ. And Jesus is on this rock I will build my church. You see, many people misunderstand what the church is. The church is not a building. The church is not a temple. The church is not a denomination. The church is not a bureaucratic hierarchy of leadership. The church isn't a form of government. The church is made up of people who believe, as Peter believed, that Jesus is Christ, the Son of the living God. The church is made up of people who declare, as Peter declared, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. The church is made up of people who live out the declaration of faith that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, the Messiah, the chosen one, the anointed one, the Savior. Belief in Jesus' identity unleashes power. It unleashes the power of heaven to do amazing things in this world and in the next. It does amazing things, even so amazing that it changes us to our very core. It changes our bodies and it changes our souls. You see, when we declare that faith, when we declare the truth of Jesus' identity, when we accept that truth as our own, it connects us to God. It ties our soul with His Spirit. And as our soul remains close to His Spirit, it starts to rub off. Did you ever hang around with somebody so long you started to pick up some of their sayings or some of their characteristics that kind of rub off on you? Well, as you hang around with God, as you get close to God, as your soul and spirit rub elbows with His, you start to act more like God. You start thinking the way that God thinks. You start talking the way that God talks. You start feeling the way that God feels. You start acting the way that God acts. And this process of becoming more like God is called sanctification. The closer you are to Him, the more powerful the experience gets. If you aren't feeling inspired to become closer to God, if you aren't motivated to act more like your Heavenly Father, there may be a very real and very dangerous disconnect in your life. Those who believe as Peter believed, awaken in themselves a spiritual power that comes from heaven, and it's in their lives, and it does amazing things. Power that can change our lives. It can change a person's soul so dramatically that they go from eternal destination in hell to living with God in heaven forever. It prepares our soul to be in His presence forever. It changes things on earth and in heaven. And you know what? Satan hates them. He's going to do everything in his power to destroy that connection. He's going to throw his biggest weapons at us. This is what Jesus means when He talks about the gates of Hades. He says, the gates of Hades shall not prevail. A gate in the ancient Near East was a very important place. First of all, because it was well protected. Anytime you build a wall and leave a hole in it, you leave yourself open to danger. So what they would do is they would build these elaborate gate complexes where you would have to turn and stop, and they would put holes in the roof where they could drop things like boiling oil on you or spears. The gates were heavily protected, a military fortress that you had to pass through, a gauntlet of death that you had to break through to get into the city. A gate was a symbol of power. It was a metaphor for power. But gates are also a metaphor for authority. You see, because they were so complex and so big, they were an open area. When they weren't in the middle of a war, they would be used for public gatherings. The elders of a city would meet at a gate. And the inhabitants of the city, if they had disagreements, would come to the elders. And the elders would act as arbitrators, a sort of civil arbitrator. They would be kind of a court. Gates, then, also represented authority. Gates were analogous with power and with authority. When Jesus says that the gates of Hades, the gates of hell, will not overcome the church, what he is saying is that Satan, first of all, hates the church. He hates God's people, and when someone joins the church, he hates them. And he's going to do everything in his power and use all of his authority, his gates, to destroy the church and anyone in it. He will try to hurt, discourage, confuse, and kill anyone who believes as Peter believes. Anyone who declares, as Peter declares, Jesus' identity. Anyone who lives out that belief in their lives. Satan is going to throw all of his power and authority, his hatred, his evil, his lies, all the destructive forces that he can muster against the church. But Jesus makes a promise. Hell will not overpower the church because it is founded on the truth of Jesus' identity. Jesus says Satan will try and Satan will fail. Satan will attack with power and authority, but when his lies collide with the truth, they will be destroyed. When his lies smack into the identity of Jesus as Christ and Son of the living God, they will be demolished. The church has a sure foundation in Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. No matter what storm Satan brews up, the church will survive because we are on the side of God's Christ, his Son. Now, something that you may not understand for the disciples, when Jesus was saying this, it must have been a very, very powerful image in their minds because of where Jesus was saying this. Jesus took the disciples up to the gates of hell to make this declaration. There is a place in northern Israel that the Greeks thought was the gate to Hades. It was the gateway to Hades. And it was a place called Caesarea Philippi. And in the opening of our verse, which Brian read for us, Matthew says that Jesus took them to the region of Caesarea Philippi and then asked them the question. I thought you might like to see what the gates of Hades look like. What do the gates of hell look like? If you ask somebody in our country, what do the gates of hell look like? What might be an answer? What might they say? What? Fiery, right? Fiery, maybe rusty metal, stones, molten lava, something like that. But remember, in the Greeks' mind, the gateway to hell was not laced with fire, but with water. Do you remember the Greek myth of the river called Styx? You would have to pay the boatman who would take you across the river into the underworld. So in their minds, when they thought of Hades, they didn't think of a fiery gate, but they thought of a watery gate. In Caesarea Philippi, there is a river that pours out of the side of a mountain. They couldn't figure out where the water was coming from, and so they thought, well, maybe this is the gate to the underworld. And so they built a temple right on top of the river, and it became a holy site, a shrine of pilgrimage. And I have a picture that Andrew's going to bring up for you of what this looked like, probably looked like in Jesus' day when the disciples came to Caesarea.